Podium.
You want me to sit
Yes,
up?
yes,
to sit
yes.
up there? Okay. So then I can.
I'll basically introduce you and I'll stop.
Fine.
I don't know if you want
And
a final
then,
session of
well, I
questions.
prefer then to stand here.
Okay.
Yes.
We can sit and then you
Thank you.
and then I'll go there.
Yeah, thank you.
The introduction. So, welcome, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and students of IMT. It's a great honor and pleasure to have here today Professor Helga Nowotny for our graduation ceremony. Professor Nowotny is Professor Emeritus of Social Studies of Science at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Institute of Technology in Zurich. And more importantly, is a founding member and the president of the European. She's a founding member of the European Research Council, and she is the president of the European Research Council, who changed the EU agenda on science and research, contributing in a very important way, I would say in a fundamental way, in reshaping the science arena and creating what was foreseen by the Treaty of Lisbon, that is to say, an integrated European research area. First of all, contributing to the creation of an internal market for researchers and for research within Europe. Secondly, contributing to coordinate, I would say, based on meritocracy, competition, and excellence, the research activities performed by individual member states. And third, which is something that I alluded to, promoting excellence. For example, I thought and I think that it is a very important point, the portability of research grants for both senior and young scholars, because it introduces a competition among the research institutions to attract the best, and is somehow changing in a fundamental way the way in which European science is evolving. Finally, which is also important for our institute, the systematic, I would say, violation of rigid disciplinary boundaries, which is part of the notion of frontier research, that is to say, integrating basic science and mission-oriented programs which perform functions which go beyond the disciplinary boundary, is a fundamental contribution in order to solve one of the problems of the European research system, which has been traditionally the rigidity of the research boundaries, which have been somehow evolving over time within our universities. So it's a great honor again to have you today, both because of your scientific reputation, scientific activities, and because of your role in giving shape to the European Research Council and to the European Research Area. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Fabio. I prefer to stand here then. I think I will need some instructions here, but let me first start by saying that the pleasure is on my side. And the pleasure is, first of all, I've been given a short visit to this wonderful place that is still under construction. And I've been told that next year in spring it will all be finished and opened. And it gives me an opportunity to come to this new institution, which is as young as the ERC. You were founded in 2007, and the ERC also started in 2007. So we share the birth year, being young, being ambitious, wanting to change things that we believe need to be changed. And I would like to begin with just a very brief introduction why the notion of excellence matters. We all take it for granted that excellence is important, But if you think of it, science itself is intrinsically striving for excellence. It is striving for excellence because science needs to work. And if you are not performing what you do, be it as a practitioner, be it as a theoretician, and striving for the highest level, it is unlikely that you will get things to work in the way you want them to work. Breakthroughs come from excellent new insights, even if what is considered excellent may change. And we also have this old saying that goes back already to the 13th century, I was told, standing on the shoulder of giants. We all build on the knowledge, the wisdom, the insights, also the technologies of previous ages and of men and women who have preceded the present generation. And this striving for excellence that I think is inherent in science is expressed in the currency. You know, the currency we use in everyday life, it's the euro, it's money, but science has, although it needs money, science has a different currency. And this currency is scientific reputation. Now, scientific reputation can be transformed into resources. If you have high reputation, you are able to get an ERC grant and so on. But the scientific currency in science remains reputation, and this is based on excellence. Now, for an individual, why is excellence important? You are belonging to a scientific community. Even as Fabio Pamoli just mentioned, it is important to violate disciplinary boundaries. But nevertheless, while new scientific communities are emerging, are being transformed, nevertheless, you want to have excellence that is recognized by your peers. And it's the peers that judge excellence. My definition of excellence is a very simple one, namely it is no exact definition of excellence, because I like to say excellence, you need to recognize it when you encounter it. And in this definition, you have the relation between those who claim to be excellent and those who actually recognize it. And it is therefore that you need also very good peers to recognize excellence. And as every researcher knows, science is both its competition and its cooperation, and there has to be a balance between the two. Now, excellence is also important for institutions. We all know that in Europe now we also have the ranking of universities, and while we can have many skeptic and criticisms about particular rankings, nevertheless these rankings will not disappear, and they are based on various criteria that are considered excellence. And the reputation of institutions is important to attract students, to attract faculty. So excellence matters also for institutions. And as I will show you in a few minutes, what we have seen, one of the impacts that was not intended, and I see Salvatore Settis here, whom I want to say a special welcome to, and seeing you again, one of the founding members and founding fathers also of the Scientific Council of the ERC. The excellence of institutions and the striving for excellence, we notice it because for the first time in Europe, we have a competition among universities in Europe. Before, you were within, as an institution, within one national system, but you did not compare yourself with a university outside your own country, and even within your own country, normally you did not compare yourself. And now, due to the ERC, the scientific reputation of having an ERC grant is something that university rectors and presidents actively are looking for, and it becomes part of, to use the marketing term, even the branding of a university or of a research institution. And in a similar way, I could go on. Excellence matters also for countries, and it matters for Europe in a world which is globalizing very rapidly. Now, what I want to share with you is how to achieve excellence in Europe. I'm supposed to press where to come to my first slide. This is an optimistic picture of where we are. Optimistic. So here, let me just, to go back. Where do I go back? So here I move forward, and here I move. Okay. So here you see Brussels in its best with sunshine. And the ERC's offices are located in the upper floors of this building that you see here. So let me take you back just a bit of history of how the ERC came about. And for those of you, I see the younger generation is much more numerous in this room, but there may be some who still remember what EU funding was like before the ERC. And it is difficult to understand why it has taken so long to set up, as part of the EU funding, one part which is devoted only to excellence and to fund individual researchers. No, I am. So what was happening here is, in order to achieve excellence, you need to set up a peer review system that can indeed recognize excellence when it is encountered, and this at world level. Now, we did not reinvent the peer review system. The flaws are known, the good things are known about it, but we tried to the maximum extent possible to select the best possible peers. We are the most international funding agencies in the world. We have a number of our panel members who come from outside of Europe as well. And we have a highly professionalized ERC executive agency. Now, selecting the selectors, the governance structure of the ERC is something which is different from other parts of the framework program, because there is the Scientific Council. The Scientific Council consists of 22 members. We have been identified by an independent committee, and it is our task to monitor and to set the scientific strategy. And I can only confirm that the European Commission has never ever tried to influence our scientific strategy. We have encountered problems. This is also known in the beginning, because it was really a clash of cultures. The culture of science, the culture of excellence, that is a culture of trust, and much of the Commission culture was that of control. So we had to find a way of mediating this culture clash. And in order to translate our notion of excellence, we relied on these 25 panels that we have covering all areas of science and scholarship. One other characteristic of the ERC is that it includes the social sciences and the humanities. It's in the sense of the term Wissenschaft of the 19th century, when German science was at the leading edge of world science, and Wissenschaft is all inclusive. And we decided very early on, we do not want more than 25 panels for covering everything. If you want, from astronomy to zoology, if you go by alphabetical ordering. And these 25 panels are by definition multidisciplinary. They have to break the boundaries of each discipline. And sometimes we like to remind these panels also, when you speak about interdisciplinarity, it may be an artifact of how the panels is composed. because depending on which disciplines and backgrounds that people have who are sitting there are brought together, you have a new panel culture that has to arise. And it's my pleasure to have here Maria Luisa Cartoni, who is one of our panel chairs now, so she can tell you how it actually works. We from the Scientific Council, we go and we sit in the panels, we observe what they do, because this helps us to understand what works well, where are things that need to be changed. So it's a very good way of interacting. The decision is theirs, but we have this try to be as close to know what's going on and continuously to improve the evaluation procedure. Now, by now, I think the numbers have gone up since this slide was written. And incidentally, I brought another slide with me, but it's not on this computer here, which means this was not possible to put it on, but nevertheless. So let me just take you through here what the ERC actually does. Frontier research. What is frontier research? The term was meant to get over the divide that exists between what is basic research and applied research. We think this divide is obsolete in the life sciences, for instance, but also in many other areas. You cannot say, in the morning I do basic research and then in the afternoon I do applied research. It is hand in glove, and we also know that especially in the labs, there are many research technologies that are very, very important for new scientific breakthroughs. Now, is this basic? Is this applied? It is at the frontier, and this is what the ERC is after. We want to cross the boundary between the known and the unknown territory of knowledge, and therefore we also have decided the ones who know best where the frontier lies are the researchers themselves. It's not even the wisdom of my 21 colleagues. It's not the wisdom of any funders who can precisely tell you where the most exciting hot topics are. It's the researchers, and we trust the judgment of the researchers and those who evaluate them. Now, what the ERC offers, and as you know, we have two major funding schemes. One for the younger researchers, the starting grants, which we have now divided into two. So in fact, we have three major schemes by now: starting grants, consolidators, advanced grants. Starting grants are for 2 to 7 years past your PhD, consolidators 7 to 12 years, and advanced grant for already established. And what the ERC offers, especially for the starting grantees and the consolidators, is scientific independence at an early age. We know when we compare, and I've learned that many of you have spent time in the US, which incidentally is a good precondition to win an ERC grant. We have looked into the curriculum of those who win ERC grants and those who have failed in doing so, but who have applied. And having been to the US gives you an extra boost. So but what happens in the US and why this is important? Because in general, Europe is not very good in giving early scientific independence to its young researchers. And the ERC wants to change that. Because with an ERC grant, also as Fabio said, it's portable. So if you do not find the conditions at your host institution, at your university, that fits what you expect, and we make the host institution agree before that this is the condition under which you get this independence, you take your grant and you can move elsewhere. So this is something that we attach great importance to, and we can also see that by now, the figures will come later, we have funded by now about 3,000 researchers, 60% of whom are starting grants. So we have a large number of young ERC grantees working in Europe under the best conditions, and especially being scientific independence. So here is a short look backwards, the first 5 years of existence. Numbers here, 3,000 proposals, 500 different host institutions throughout Europe. One condition is you have to work in Europe. The nationality is not important, but Europe is the place where at least you have to spend 30% or 50%, depending on whether you're a starting grantee or an advanced grantee. And what we see is not surprising. There is a concentration effect in science. It's also called the Matthew effect. According to the Bible word, those who have, to those will be given. The concentration effect, and this is again related to excellence that I spoke to before, 50% of our principal investigators are in 50 institutions. But it's important for the other institutions that they know there is upward mobility is possible. They can also attract more ERC grantees. It's highly competitive, as you would expect, even if our budget has gone up. We started with 300 million. Right now we spend 1.7 billion euro per year. But the success rate also to the demand has remained more or less at 12%. And of course, we also want to add to make Europe more attractive. Now, this is just gives you an overview of what I've just mentioned. The starters, 2 to 7 years after PhD, up to 2 million for 5 years. Consolidators, 7 to 12 years, up to 2.75 million. The advanced grants can ask for more money. And here we look especially whether they have been active, the track record of the last 10 years, and established researchers. And I can tell you, it's not really a secret, but we also had Nobel Prize winners who came to us who were turned down because the project was not up to our standards. So it's really both the track record of the person and the excellence of the idea that count. And I will then later on mention the synergy grants and proof of concepts, which are small experiments. Now, numbers, more numbers. We started in the year 2007 with these incredible number of 9,000 applications that brought the system to the brink more than once. We survived, luckily, but it was not always to be taken for granted. And now you can also see in the right-hand column the success rates. Now, these are a few figures from Italy. As we are in Italy, I thought it's of interest to see where does Italy stand in this competition. You can see the year 2007, especially all young Italians pinned their hopes on the ERC. They thought, now finally there is some funding available. But as the success rate was only 3%, I'm sorry to say this was love's labor lost. Here you also see, especially in the starting grants, the numbers go up. And here is the place of Italy in the overall competitions we have had so far. And Italy, to put it, how should I put it? Italy could and should do better looking at this placement, because you see the large countries, but you see a small country like Switzerland and another small country like Israel. So, and another small country like Sweden, which is a bit less, but you see what some of the problems are. And this tries to go a bit deeper into why is Italy not doing better. There are enough, these are the projects that go to Italian host institutions, and here is already one of the problems we can identify, and this is the success rate. The success rate is the difference between the number of applications and those that succeed. Now, what does the success rate actually tell you? It tells you, first of all, something about the ability to know approximately where you stand. It has to do something with the ability of self-evaluation. If you are overconfident, the success rate will be low, but overconfidence also means you are not really judging accurately where you are standing, and I think this is part of the problem. Now, these numbers are more or less constant, and it's much more complex, but I think one of the problems in Italy might be, I can only speculate here, is that there is not a culture of self-evaluation which is widespread enough in Italy. But we can, discuss this also later on. And here is another graph that reveals one of the problems of Italy that it shares incidentally with Germany. Germany also has a very high number of young Germans working outside Germany. And if you ask these young Germans why they are working outside, they say it's not so much the money, it's the hierarchy in our universities. Germany funding is available, but young people leave the university because they know the length of dependence on a professor is far too long, and so they choose to leave. And the fuga dei cervelli that you see here in Italy, you are in a better position to know why you have this fuga dei cervelli. Here we see some of the host institutions. Those in the back cannot see it, but there are not so many surprises. Cambridge and Oxford lead. Then it's the two research universities of Switzerland, EPFL in Lausanne and ETH Zurich, University College London, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Weizmann, etc., etc. And in the bottom, you see the large research organizations. This is, of course, also a matter of size. The CNRS in France, the Max Planck Society, INSERM, CEA, etc. But the Italian CNR is not yet on this list. Here you see numbers of how the various Italian host institutions do. Here the CNR leads in terms of number, and then you see the rest. These numbers, of course, change slightly. We have seen over the years that the changes are not so dramatic. We do have panel members from Italy here. We could have more, and we also will try to make an effort in this direction. We compose the panel members just to, this may be of interest to you also. The panel members are, this is very, very important, and you saw it on the slide, but I should perhaps have emphasized it more. It's the scientific council that chooses the panel members. And this is a specificity of the ERC, and personally I'm convinced that without this possibility of the scientific council choosing panel members, we would not have been so successful. This is different in other parts of the European framework programs, where the experts are chosen by the Commission, or they are taken from a long list that is an open list so everyone can register, etc. While we take as Scientific Council great care to select the panel members, we make sure that there are not more than 2 of the same nationality. We don't have a quota, but we do not want a country to dominate. So only in exceptional cases there can be 3 from the same country. We have been extremely strict with conflict of interest, because this is also something that in Europe has not been so widespread. So panel members who are from the same institution as an applicant have to leave the room during the panel discussion in order not to influence in any way the selection of the applicants. And we try to have as fair and as transparent an evaluation procedure as possible. We also try to have women in our panels. We would like to have more women in the panels, because we think it's a matter of diversity, having different perspectives coming together. Now, there are, despite the undoubted success of the ERC, and I was last summer I was at the meeting of the Euroscience conference, the ESOF, in Dublin. ESOF was held in Torino 2 years ago, and I was the chair of the program committee in Torino. So Torino now, after 2 years, was repeated in a different environment in Dublin. There the commissioner, also coming from that particular country, was opening the conference, and in her conference, in her opening address, she said, "I'm the greatest fan of the ERC." So we were able to convince the commissioner, and then we had 2 Nobel laureates as speakers. They both mentioned the ERC, saying this is the best thing that has happened in Europe, etc. So the success of the ERC and the recognition is there, but there are remaining challenges. So one of the challenges, of course, is are we funding the very best? Are we really pushing the frontier of knowledge? What does this mean also for innovation? Fabio mentioned the European Research Area, but as you know, also the Innovation Union is one of these visions for 2020 that the European Commission is very much attached to. And so this is one thing that the ERC somehow has to respond to. Now, let me perhaps go back here. No, I am. Yeah, let me just stay here a bit. The frontier research. When I spoke at the very beginning about excellence, I emphasize excellence because I really think it matters. But I do not see this as the polarized version between excellence and relevance. I think it is wrong to say relevance is one thing and excellence is another, and the two have nothing to do with each other. I think excellent research will turn out to be relevant. The question is when. And relevant research should be excellent, even in the medium term. So whether we are funding frontier research or not, of course we have a feeling, we see acknowledgement, we see scientific publications, which is the proof if you are in funding fundamental research, frontier research. It's not technological innovations that spring out of it, but it's scientific publications. And here, of course, we have a good feeling. Every week we see at least 2 or 3 papers of ERC grantees that are being published in some of the major high-impact journals. So we have a very good feeling. This week, when the Nobel Prize in Physics was announced, we were very happy to see that this is an ERC grantee, an advanced ERC grantee, Serge Arroche from the Collège de France. And when he was interviewed by the Parisian media, and they asked him, what are you going to do with the money? And he said, well, my research is already generously funded by the ERC, so I will do something else with my prize-winning money. So we have these proofs, and of course they are good to have, but nevertheless we will now start to look, because after 5 years the first grants come to an end. We will have a look what indeed have we accomplished, and this is a serious task. It's not an evaluation in the usual sense, but we are curious to know what we have funded indeed. And innovation, we invented as a small experiment the proof of concept scheme. Now the proof of concept scheme is only for those who have already an ERC grant, and either they or one of their team members would like to pick up one of the ideas that comes out of this grant or that is circulating in the team and bring it one step closer to market, to commercial application. And what we are funding is the possibility of either setting up a business plan, having a prototype if this is appropriate, etc., depending on what it is about. And interestingly enough, we have also, in the social sciences, we have also proof of concept funding. So it's up to the ERC grantee to come up with convincing ideas and say, we have an idea. But I think the function of this proof of concept is above all to make also our ERC grantees who work in frontier research, in fundamental research, to make them aware, for some of you, there might be a good idea that would be interesting to carry it further towards commercial application. And when I spoke about these 3,000, I should add that each of these 3,000 grantees have on average a team of 5 to 6 members. They are PhD students, they are postdocs. So if you multiply this, in Europe currently we have something like 15,000 young people working with ERC grantees in very good research environment. And I'm convinced that this will have an impact in Europe in the future that we don't see right away. And some of them can take such an idea and set up a spin-off company if this is appropriate. But it's nothing that we are pushing on everyone. So here the numbers are very small, but again you see Italy is not in the forefront of the proof of concept either. Now we have had another small experiment, and as this is the Synergy Grant. And the Synergy Grant turned out to be a much more difficult experiment than I and my colleagues ever thought. Why? The idea seemed to be a very simple one. It's not about consortia. It's not about networks. The ERC remains true to its idea of principal investigators, but we want to allow 2 or 3, up to 4, to come together and to say, we have an idea that can only be realized in this particular configuration. And that's the simple idea of a synergy grant. So the money is generous, but since we did not have very much that we put in here, the competition was again far too high. We received 700 submissions for a funding where we can fund maybe 15 synergy grants, 15. But the difficulty became obvious when we looked at these 700 submissions. 350 of them at least were consortia. So this means the idea of working in a consortium is so ingrained in the scientific community because, you know, this is framework program 7, so, you know, number 7. So there was a sort of conditioning and socializing going on in Europe that people think in terms of consortia, that the scientific community did not understand what we kept repeating. It was written everywhere. This is not about consortia. Nevertheless, we received so many consortia. And so we are now in the process of having the final interviews. I think it will be interesting to see what comes out of it. We will repeat it next year, but here I feel we still have a challenge in front of us to make clear to the scientific community this offers a wonderful opportunity. If you want to realize something that you know you need person A, B, and C coming from different discipline or not, coming from a different institution or not, we do not care, but you can prove and convincingly you can persuade the panelists that only this configuration is able to solve this interesting problem and to work on this idea. So this is work to be done in the future. We also would like to have more successful women among our grantees. Women are as talented as men. We know that women face difficulties that men do not face, because in particular the startup of a scientific career and starting up a family very often come together within a short period of time, which usually disadvantages women because then they give preference to the family instead of the scientific career, or they do not receive enough support from their partners. So these are well-known obstacles that women face. Nevertheless, Italy here comes out better. So especially the young Italian women scientists do something right, because as you can see, on average, among the starting grants, we have 24% women. Italy has 33%, and the advanced grant has only 12%. If you wonder why in the advanced grant we have only 12%, the answer is very sober, but also very simple. This is approximately the number of women full professors in Europe. And without being a full professor, it's unlikely that you can compete for the advanced grant. So our hope, of course, is on the starting grant numbers and that this will improve. But, and this is a message I want to leave also here, unless women apply, you do not get a chance. So we also monitor the success rate of women versus men, and it may be of interest to you. What we see is in physics and engineering, where you have few women, the women are doing slightly better in the second evaluation phase. And the same happens in the social sciences, humanity, but not in the life sciences. Now, we do not know why. We have now launched a small research project because we want to know what it is. I have ideas about it, but they are speculative. We also have a gender equality plan where we monitor, as I showed you in the examples, but we also want to raise awareness for also what host institutions can do in order to make it more attractive for women to be in science, to remain in science. We also want to attract excellent researchers from all over the world. As I said in the beginning, ERC grants are not limited to nationals of Europe, nor to the associated countries. Switzerland and Israel are the examples of associated countries that are very successful. And therefore, this is something that for your colleagues and Italians abroad, if you manage to attract them back, this might be of interest for them to come back here and to apply for an ERC grant. But it's of course also open to others who do not come from Europe. And we have launched a global campaign just to make the scientific community aware in these parts of the world that Europe exists, that the ERC exists, and we will see how far we get. Now, the prospects for the future. This is a map. This comes from a publication of the Royal Society that shows the changes in number of publications in major cities of the world, and you can see the increases where they are. They are in Southeast Asia and in Brazil. This is just another way of representing what we know. Funding goes up in China and in South Korea. Brazil is making enormous new plans now to attract also Europeans and Americans to come and work in Brazil, etc. So a lot is going on in these parts. Scientific publications, there are increases even among the most cited publications. So Europe and the US are losing ground, not because we do less, but because the others do more, and percentage-wise this shows. So for the ERC, this means, and for the EU program, this means we have rising applications. We have the Horizon 2020. Here, the ERC is in this cluster of excellence. But, and here, this means we are in the dark. The future budget for the ERC, the future budget for Horizon 2020, we do not know as yet what it will be. Negotiations have started. The European Commission has made a proposal in November 2011 of 80 billion for research and innovation. The Parliament wanted even to go up to 100, but the Parliament is not the one that has the money. The money comes from member states. And here the political signs are not very positive, because the net paying countries have already declared in public there will not be an increase in funding going to the EU. And there will be a special summit in November in Brussels, where the heads of state and government will decide how much money goes to the overall EU budget. They don't go into details, they just say overall budget, what it will be. Now, research and innovation in terms of budget is squeezed between one block, which is the common agricultural policy, which cannot be touched politically nor legally, and on the other hand, the structural funds, which again cannot be touched politically nor legally. And so we'll find ourselves sandwiched between these two blocks, and it will be very, very tough. Now, what can be done in such a situation? I have no illusion that the ERC, can change the world and will change the decision of the member states, because it's finance ministers who will decide. And for finance ministers, research is not high on the agenda. However, I know that there is younger researchers whose future is at stake. They want to start an online petition. There is the Young Academy of Europe, where this was started recently by ERC grantees, but it is open also to others. And then the Initiative for Science in Europe, which is an initiative that was instrumental in the process leading up to the establishment of the ERC. They also want to start an online petition. So it's an invitation to all of you to join the online petition. But I think we all have to reflect about the future of Europe and the role of science and innovation and the budget we need for the future of Europe. And I think the ERC is a small part in this overall picture, but I think that the ERC has demonstrated in these first 5 years of the existence that Europe can have a mark on the excellence of research in Europe and in the world, and this is something to build on, which will have benefits for societies as well as for science, for individual careers, as well as for Europe's place in the world. So thank you for your attention. I don't know whether it was too long, but my slide was a different one, you know.
We will go there for the graduation ceremony, or just a comment on 2 points. So before moving to the next part of our meeting today, I want again to thank you, not only for your presence here today, but for what you are doing for Europe. And I think that there is one point which surprised us as researchers. We submitted a paper on the European research area a few days ago. And the point is the apparent paradox that we found. Because if we, in data, that is to say, if you analyze scientific publications and patents, both, and you analyze the way in which collaboration evolved across institutions, US versus Europe, you find, we think, a problem of what Europe has been doing before the arrival of the European Research Council. That is to say, you see the emergence of member states, that is to say, you see collaboration going on within member states, but not across member states, both in patents and publications across institutions. So this is a big defeat, I would say, for programs that were intended to be, as the 7th framework program, intentionally promoting cross-country collaboration. So this is the point that we think European Research Council is bringing. That is to say that collaboration emerges in science as a result of competition and as a result of institutions competing for excellence and individuals competing for excellence. And your analysis of what the synergy experience brings to the table seems to confirm that there is a long tradition of having collaboration per se and not collaboration as a result of competition being part of European trade. So thank you for the work you are doing, because what you presented in a very polite and somehow delicate way is in fact a revolution within the European research space. Second point, and then I'll stop, I hope as an Italian citizen, as a citizen of Europe, to have the transparency that you have been able to implement in your activities, being part of a new culture at the level of member states. That is to say, I would like to know how many candidates we have for a position of assistant professor in University A or B. I would like to know the origin and the universities at which candidates got their PhDs, and so on and so forth. I want to know more about. So, and this, to be honest, is far from being the reality, at least in this country. So for sure, there is an issue of Italian scholars being able to write in a better way their proposals, but my conjecture is there is also heterogeneity in quality among member states, and the culture we are bringing is again a fundamental one, because it's a culture of transparency and accountability, and I would say meritocracy.
Yeah. Can I just make one?
I don't want to.
No, just one last remark. Now, if you go to the ERC website, we have now added a new address for statistics. So you can get all the statistics you want, you can analyze them yourself, and I think this is something that you should also do in Italy.
Yes, for sure. And to be honest, the other point, and I'll stop, is another revolution that you were able to introduce, which is overcoming the distinction between fundamental science and applied. We had an entire generation of European programs for which technology transfer was a goal per se, and the research infrastructures were a responsibility of the member states. On the contrary, the notion of frontier research brings a fundamental change that I don't know if has been fully recognized yet, but for sure goes against the ideology of having basic science and then technology transfer with programs. So I'm sorry if I was too long, but I just wanted to specify why we are so happy and proud of having you here today. Now we move to the most important section of our meeting today, and I would like now to congratulate all graduates on their achievements and wish them every success for the future. And I will invite them to come to the podium to get their diplomas from Professor Nowotny. We can go here. And
so I can take this over.
Yes. Stefano Abbasi, who got his PhD in computer science and engineering with a thesis on wireless sensing devices from research to real applications in logistics and healthcare. So congratulations and thank you. Lucca Ancora, computer science and engineering again, spectrum sharing in mobile cellular networks, an alternative approach for efficient resource utilization. Congratulations. Alessandro Ciaramella, again in computer sciences and engineering, a thesis on situation awareness in mobile recommendation systems. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Donata Franzi, a PhD in Political Systems and Institutional Change, Energy Rules Harmonization in the Euro-Mediterranean Area between external pressures for rules change and domestic institutional restraints, the case of independent regulatory agency. What a long title. So, congratulations. Bing Luong Tan, Computer Science and Engineering, Generalized Discrimination Discovery on Semi-Structured Data Supported by Ontology. Congratulations. Congratulations. Irene Mammi with a PhD in Economics, Markets and Institutions, essays on GMM estimation of dynamic panel data models. And then Giovanni Marin, again with a PhD in Economics, Markets and Institutions, essays in Applied Environmental and Innovation Economics. Congratulations. Anche se rimane quel grave di Luzin Mikchan, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, with a thesis in Computer Science and Engineering, alternative solutions to traditional approaches to risk analysis and decision making using fuzzy logic. Congratulations. Marco Mori, with this thesis in PhD, with a PhD in Computer Science and Engineering, with a thesis on a framework to support consistent design and evolution of adaptive systems. Congratulations. Ilaria Petrarca, with a thesis on, the title is Essays on Electoral Accountability and Local Public Finances, a PhD in Economics, Markets and Institutions. Congratulations. Hossein Wahabi, with a thesis on recommendation techniques for web search and social media, a thesis, a PhD in Computer Science and Engineering. Congratulations. And then for those among our graduates who, being already working outside and inside the country, were not able to join us today, I also want to share with them the pleasure of having you here today and congratulate them as well.
So all these, in 2 years, you can apply for an ERC starting grant.
This is the good news they wanted to know. So, thank you, and really thank you again for your presence here today.
Please,
Grazie davvero.
Please to send me these papers.
Yes,
Both
I'll send you.
the one
I'll send you.
have,
I'll
but also-
send
but
you.
also
Because basically the title we presented is Ira losing momentum.